Okay, so today on On-Chain Nation, we have a really great opportunity to talk to the founder of SC Prime, and we're going to talk about the migration of the SC Prime utility token to the Solana blockchain. So stick around. All right, so Ken, welcome to On-Chain Nation, and I'm so glad to have you on and to kind of get into this kind of early information. It's kind of time-sensitive information, I suppose, if you look at it that way. But we want to talk about the migration of the utility token, the SPF, to the Solana blockchain. And maybe before we get into that, but welcome to On-Chain Nation.
Thanks for having me.
All right, great. But first, before we get into it, I was hopeful that, some of the viewers might not have a full picture of what the project's like. Maybe if you could go through a little bit of the history and where we are today.
Yeah, so SC Prime started in 2018 in the depths of the bear market. And in fact, we've been pretty good at picking event type dates. We started Genesis block on this proof of work ASIC miner driven network on October 31st, 2018. And anybody who was around back then will remember that about 10 days later, Bitcoin had been flat for, I don't know, months. It was a lot of months. And everybody was thinking that it was going to, trying to figure out if it was going to go up or go down. And of course, in November of 2018, it went straight down, went from about 6,500 to about 3,000. And that caused a lot of people who were already dismayed or not terribly interested in the space to leave, who were sort of marginal. So that set up the next couple of years for us in an environment that was very challenging in a lot of ways. But what we did was we just put our heads down because we had a very solid idea of a decentralized storage network. We call it more distributed storage network. But the whole thing that we built this on, me and my two co-founders essentially, was that we wanted to provide and we believed that distributed storage can provide a better architecture for business cloud than what the current biggies do, AWS, Google, Azure. And so we just put our heads down, and for the next 2.5 to 3 years, just worked on building software to be able to provide that. We've never really been into that whole dogma of, crypto decentralization, and we know that's a scale. Our big thing is product market fit on selling business cloud to real world customers.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting is, I've seen the chart in regards to just data growth in general. So how does SC Prime fit into this data growth that we see ahead of us?
Yeah, and that's another thing that we've always been really focused on when we started really looking at, forecasts, because you don't have to think too hard about, what's coming. Everything is up-resing, first of all. So when you go to the movies, they started out back in my day. I don't want to give away my age too much here, but there was a time where everything was VHS and then 480p quality when it all began to get online and so forth. And then it moved up to HD, which was 1080p, and then 4K. And every time it takes one of these jumps, it's not like a doubling or necessarily a quadrupling. It's usually an exponential. So what happens is the amount of data needed to store grows significantly. Now, alongside that, compression algorithms and things like that come along, so it mitigates. And so if you look at a chart of stuff that's stored online right now, it's kind of flat. I mean, it's been fairly flat. It's been growing, but it hasn't been growing at any kind of big, Ray Kurzweil type exponential curve. But that's coming. And almost everybody agrees that that's coming. And it's all the AR, MR, it's all the up-resing of things, it's onlining everything. And so our belief system's pretty simple in that regard. It's a rising tide raises all boats philosophy, and we just feel like we can have one of the best absolute cloud services on the planet, bar none.
I know you guys have been super busy with products. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of the products that you've put together well, you've had a little bit of a development period here, and maybe even a good opportunity during this previous slow market. get yourself poised for the future. What kind of products do you have lined up?
So the core product is the storage product. This is
Mhm.
an S3 compatible network cloud storage. So anybody who's running S3 right now, which is 50,000 plus applications for compatibility, can use our cloud storage product. This product, the flagship, was released in July of 2023 finally, and it's accompanied by a piece of hardware, a hardware or a software stack called the Relayer. And the Relayer is a game changer. It really allows every customer to take advantage of this distributed data center and create something that we call virtual private data centers. So essentially, you can build your own custom data center on our
Yeah.
cloud. Prior to that, in order to build the cloud, to get the cloud out there that actually does what we do, we needed to build a network node. And this device, and then later became a licensed piece of software as well, is called the Examiner. And the Examiner is essentially a node that you buy, typically plug and play.
Mhm.
You just put it into your network anywhere that has internet and power, and you're providing data onto the cloud that we've built. And then that way, anybody who's running a relayer and who's purchased cloud services can then go out and find your node, or the computer
Right.
software actually does it for them. So those are the two core products.
Yeah, I've gotten involved a little bit about a year ago. I've got a couple of Exum miners myself, and I see that data just inching up and inching up, and it just continuously increases. It's pretty awesome because it really was plug and play. And it's kind of a neat. And I've also got dabbled a little bit in the DIY side of it, where I picked up some of the licenses and put together some machines also. But it's been a kind of a fun experience. Maybe it also would be a good idea just to discuss the token side of things.
To begin with, when the project launched,
Mhm.
one of the things that happens right now as our community has grown is we don't really have an awful lot of governance issues, or we haven't. We're starting to run into more and more of them, but because we started out as sort of, these days kind of more like a Bitcoin network, right? With
Yeah.
permissionless ASIC mining. The only way to get the token was to go out and buy an expensive ASIC computer and pop that in there and be able to calculate the consensus.
Mhm.
That whole model now is 5 years long, right? So essentially, the majority of the supply has already been mined. We're now down to
Mhm.
it's like 1.5% inflation rate. So, and that's a utility coin that gets thrown off from that mining, which is used in our smart contracts. And as you just noted, it's called SCP.
Yeah. Then we have the SPF.
Oh yeah, SPF is a secondary token that lives on the
Mhm.
network. It's a rent-seeking token in a lot of ways. This token essentially was just all pre-mined,
Mhm.
and the deal with it is that it was built to incentivize network behavior. It was built to allow us to incentivize people to do various things of utility on the network. It's never been offered for sale. It's never been
Mhm.
sold to anybody by the corporation, the development team. It's been given out to various people, as bonuses or freebies or whatever. For a long time, people that invested, the bootstrap, investors
Mhm.
in our development corp, got a number of them as, freebies, as bonuses once they purchased stock in the corp. But so this token is interesting because what it does is, as a population, it just sits there and collects a percentage of all the contract rent. So our network works like most other decentralized networks. What happens is contracts are permissionlessly formed between a client and the nodes on the network. The client we call the renter, the nodes on the network we call hosts, and that permissionless smart contract that gets created uses that SCP coin as the utility inside the smart contracting. What the SPF token does is it sits over top and it says, okay, well, if there's $4 that's been contracted between these two parties,
Mhm.
30% gets pulled out of that $4 and locked into an output, and then ultimately at successful resolution of the contract gets distributed amongst all the SPF holders. Now, at first you would look at that and say, well, geez, that's how is that fair?
Mhm.
Why do they get that? Well, what happens is that only one side of the contract actually pays for that fee, right? And that's the renter side, the customer side. They pay for both sides of the contract fees that go into this SPF. This was the way the project was initially built, because back in 2018, the whole DeFi, smart contracting, the way things are really being, escalated now on Ethereum and on other blockchains like Solana and AVAX had not really matured. I mean, think about it. Back in 2018, some of the biggest things that were on Ethereum were ICOs, just people
Mhm.
selling coins to fund things that they wanted to work on that ultimately, in a lot of cases, came to fruition. A lot of cases didn't. But so in our view, being this UTXO proof of work chain, this was kind of our response to that whole thing. If we had to do it over again, we'd probably design it a little differently on, a different blockchain and so forth. But this is the way it's currently set up. And those SPFs have worked very well to incentivize behaviors. And I think ultimately, as we migrate them to another blockchain, it foreshadows how we expect to use them going forward: governance, consensus generation, various
Mhm.
kinds of other things that we expect to happen with them.
Right. Right. So, so with the SPF at least, I know this is kind of the topic of the day here, is that you see that transitioning. You're in a transitional period right now. Like, so what was the main reason to drive in this direction, and kind of what are some of the details?
Well, one of the issues of coming alive in 2018, a lot of proof of work blockchains started back in 2015, 2014,
Hmm.
2016. And then what happened is, as new projects started coming along in 2019 and beyond, very few, really started out as, raw hardware backed, electricity backed proof of work blockchains, because it's so easy now to set up, tokens on Ethereum and Solana and others.
Hmm.
So in our case, what happened is that we started looking, well, not started, I mean, through the whole life of the project, we started recognizing that, achieving the kind of hash rate that somebody like Bitcoin ends up with is probably going to be a pretty hard ask, unless or until you actually reach the kind of scale of, a big like Wasabi or AWS or one of
Hmm.
these big storage companies. And so the problem is that on the way between here and there, you're going to be storing a whole bunch of valuable data. But since in our case, the storage proofing is not really tied necessarily to the stored data, there's nothing there to generate essentially hash rate growth, right? To
Right.
cover the security of that stored data. So what we realized almost immediately was this network's always going to be chasing security, and it's not likely to be secure enough to cover the security of stored data assets that customers are wanting to onboard, once we get really valuable, in terms of the amount of data on the network and the types of data. So that led us ultimately, I mean, it's been 2 years. We just haven't had a chance, with the bear market being what it was. But that led us to believe that we ultimately have to move and migrate the whole blockchain, smart contracting layer, the storage network itself, to another more secure layer one. We noted that about 2 years ago. And so that is this year's focus, 2024's focus. That's where we're kind of headed.
Yeah. So I think you've made the decision to head over to Solana. What were some of your main drivers to make that decision to pick the Solana blockchain?
Well, we like some of the features like composability, the ability to sort of object orient stuff and plug and play various
Hmm.
modules and components that we think that's going to be really powerful, being able to plug wallets and exchanges into some of our assets like our miners and so forth. We're doing some of that work right now internally. Like we have something called storage credits that the individual miners can convert their utility coin wins into actual storage on the network. But when you get onto the Solana blockchain, a lot of that stuff is, driven right into the protocol. Right now on our proof of work, and this actually feels really antiquated, but it's the same as Bitcoin, by the way. But our block times are 10 minutes on average, right?
Hmm.
Whereas on Solana, I think we're talking about a 400 millisecond block time or something crazy
Yeah.
like that. So very
Yeah.
fast
Yeah.
block time. So that allows for a lot of stuff for us from the point of scalability and being able to grow the network to the size and scale that we expect to
Hmm.
grow it to. To be frank about it, we probably could succeed on our L1 if we really wanted to. I mean, our scalability isn't an issue because we're literally the only thing on our blockchain, right?
Hmm.
Since we aren't an ecosystem, we're a single purpose blockchain. Um, that's the deal. But again, that security issue, once we get, to the point where the market cap is big enough or where the stored network data is big enough, the security is just going to be a nightmare for us. And so it just makes it so it has to be a thing.
Yeah, I know you and your team, your entire team have been really busy since I think it was in November timeframe. I think when November, December timeframe when you made the announcement that you're going to make this transition and that there was going to be a lot of activity around this transition to Solana and creating opportunity. It's going to create an opportunity. Some of the liquidity pool opportunities in the development of the transporter. Could you give us a little bit of a background on what are we looking at here in the next couple of months?
Yeah. So what ended up happening, and I think we did it the way we always do things. We did it the right way in that, we didn't start looking at, how do we, make the most money or how do we, do some things like that. What we did was we looked out there first of all at the technology. We looked at the architectures of AVAX. We looked at a few other L1s. We looked at where Ethereum was, this current uh, EIP that's coming down the road to mitigate fees and some of the stuff like that. Um, and so ultimately, we made this decision for Solana based on technical reasons more than anything else to start with. But if you go back and listen to any of our roadmap calls, this wasn't going to happen until about mid 2024 when we would begin this process of a migration because we have so many other things with our storage product that we're really grinding on right now
Yeah.
and trying to get it to market and achieve PMF. But what ended up happening then is the bear market just, like it does, stretched on and on and on. And a lot of
Mhm.
investors kind of had, walked away and were not really paying attention. And funding was becoming a real issue for us as a purely bootstrapped company. So
Yeah.
we were kind of forced to bring that whole thing forward. Once we made the decision based on technical reasons, then we had to sit down and decide, okay, well, how does it work? What goes first, second, third, and fourth? And the only real answer that made any sense was to first migrate our tokens over to the other side, right? Because
Mhm.
right now on our situation, because we are a proprietary L1, none of the bridges support us, right?
Yeah.
There
Right.
are no bridging technologies right now to move our tokens over to Ethereum or to move our tokens over to Solana. And a lot of the old POWs are like this, right? I mean, people have bridged Bitcoin, obviously, but beyond that, it starts getting difficult and so forth. So we realized we had to move our tokens first of all. That was the first step. And then the second step will be to begin migrating over the smart contracting in the network. And then finally, by the end of the year, we should be able to have the whole, shooting match over there. So when you boil it down to moving the tokens first, and remember we got two tokens,
Yep. Yep.
Then you had to sort of make a decision, well, how do you send the tokens over and which one goes first? Do they go together? What happens? And so ultimately our decision was, let's move that rent seeker over first, right? The incentive token, and get that stood up and get people to understand we exist and to learn about us and to, get in there and do LP work, providing staking liquidity underneath it and really kind of
Hmm.
introduce ourselves to the Solana community. And then after that, we'll move over the SCP utility token in a measured pace before we ultimately move on to the network.
Yeah, gotcha. So what does that mean for people? I mean, people that I think maybe have been watching SC Prime from the outside. Maybe some of us have been participating as storage providers, but now it seems like there's another whole opportunity with the SPF. And how is that going to transpire in the next month or two in terms of staking or liquidity pools? Could you give us a little bit more of a summary on that?
Well, I think first of all, the first thing storage providers on our network should take home from all of this is that by moving in the direction we're moving, we are actually fulfilling a promise that, is really critical to this project. And that's right now, what we've learned the hard way is that consensus generation through disinterested third parties who really only have this one motivation, which is money, uh, creates a mercenary environment. And while you can make a case that that's not a bad thing,
Yep.
in our view, it's really important for the storage providers, the people that actually are providing the resources for the network, to take part in, if not to drive the whole consensus model. So in the future, when we do move the blockchain to smart contracting, we expect it to be some kind of a blended proof of storage or, proof of capacity or proof of something related to the storage model, and then probably some component of proof of stake in there as well. So in that regards, it's likely that SPF will play a fairly large role in that. SCP will too, but SPF will definitely play a large role in that process. So what's happened over the last couple of years is we've given out a lot of these SPFs as different kinds of bonuses for performance, for utility, for rebates, for all kinds of different purposes.
Mhm.
So most storage providers have some of these SPFs. And the idea is that the benefit of the current decentralized exchange strategies is that you can actually earn the money that typical centralized exchanges used to earn or still earn in large measure, um, or the trading fees for people wanting to buy and sell these things.
Mhm.
So on the way to consensus generation earnings, all of the people that decide to participate in terms of staking SPFs over on the other side will be able to pick up yield for holding these tokens in addition to the already outstanding yield, the rent seeking that they earn on our internal network. We've built this mechanism called the transporter, and the transporter is a one-way bridge. It's essentially a bridge that sends tokens across to the other side. Instead of doing sort of like a DAO-based, decentralized two-way bridge, which would have required a lot more development, a lot more, of our effort and so forth, and not any real good purpose to it, because the whole notion is we know we're migrating everything to the other
Mhm.
side sooner or later. So there's not a lot of reason for us to develop this two-way back and forth, because essentially everything's going to end up over there anyway. So the transporter is a one-way bridge. And to send this transporter across, there will be what we're calling an initial tranche, which is this
Mhm.
first subset of tokens that will go across. But then there will be an emission schedule. SPFs have never been listed anywhere. They've
Yep.
never traded anywhere. We've never sold them anywhere. So this is the emission of SPFs essentially. So as these go across the transporter to the other side, this will make up the circulating supply that exists on the other side. Now, one of the things that we decided early on in this process of developing this transporter was that we wanted to incentivize people to do liquidity provision, right? Because we're a real thing, right? We're not a
Yeah,
meme token. So we're not gonna get that, hefty narrative meme that drives a lot of crazy staking and liquidity and purchasing because of, it's the hottest thing under the sun. But we do believe there's always a good community of people that are looking for real things. And so essentially what we expect to do is we are building into the smart contract 15 million of these SPFs. And what will happen is that the smart contract will track via NFTs um, time and amounts staked in liquidity pools, the ones that are specifically set up, by the project. So if you stake in the liquidity pool to provide AMM for the TVL for the community,
hmm,
then ultimately over a period of time, you will get a payout in additional SPFs, whether that's an airdrop or something else, a
sure,
reward program. I guess it's not up to me to decide, but
right.
it is rewards, right? It's rewards for doing this utility.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So moving forward, what are some of the next steps? Or maybe a better question would be like those who want to get involved, how can we get involved? What is the next step for us? I guess any good YouTube video would have check the links in the description section below. And so we will do that. We'll put plenty of resources down there if there's ways for the audience to want to continue to get involved or to learn more about it. What would you like to offer on that?
Well, there's lots of stakeholders in our project, right?
Mhm.
And the one thing that I would say from the beginning, the biggest stakeholder that we're really interested in right now and who I think has the most to gain from joining our group is something, it's a cloud professional, what is
Mhm.
typically called a cloud service professional or a managed service provider,
Right.
or even just an old-fashioned value-added reseller, but somebody who offers and sells cloud services or consultatively installs cloud or configures cloud services for customers. That's the biggest uh, draw that we're seeking right now is folks that are in that world to come aboard because we have a partnering program that offers cloud at a discounted price. There are some future things we're going to do like white labeling and
Hmm.
affiliate links and things like that. So that's the first one. The second one is obviously to get involved as a storage provider. Now, what's happened for us, and these charts right behind me kind of highlight this,
Hmm.
the one specifically on the left-hand side, the blue one, it went straight up in 2022 early. We sold a whole bunch of nodes and then kind of like called timeout. And
Hmm.
then now we've been in a consolidation phase. You can kind of see it trending down and flat in this consolidation phase. But that's the next step is that the network is going to get back into that growth mode again and head back north in a big way. And so picking up network licenses or buying EXA miners is a thing. And one of the really cool things right now that we have is if you buy an EXA miner or if you buy a license for the network, you get a bunch of those freebie SPF tokens.
Hmm.
So those can go across to the other side and be plugged into liquidity pools immediately and earn yield. So if you're looking to earn yield between now and when we launch the transporter, there is this ability to get tokens that way in order to stick into the liquidity pools. Once the transporter starts, well, that is going to stop, and essentially to be able to acquire tokens, you'll just have to go on to the dexes over on Solana and just buy tokens
Yep.
and pick them up.
Great. Yeah, that sounds great. And so we'll provide plenty of those links and resources in the comment section. So did you have anything else to offer? We're going to wrap it up.
Just that the next step behind this, because a lot of the storage providers, when they hear this story, get a little bit scared and confused that SPF is going to subsume
Mm.
SCP and that SCP won't have any value and blah, blah, blah. Um, frankly, it doesn't have any value right now. Well, that's not true, but
Yeah.
it has never achieved the kind of valuations of our comps And the reason why it's never achieved that is primarily because we never were able to gain the kind of market making and significant investment required to be on large centralized exchanges.
Mhm.
So the nice thing about this whole process is we expect after we send the SPF over that we will be able to build a migration path for the SCP tokens to follow as well.
Right,
And
right.
so there's 55 million of those that have been mined, and that's pretty much the total supply. I mean, over the next 3 years, there's only going to be like another million mined. So the deal is that people that want to get liquidity, get price discovery, get, yield, get all of those things that they're, interested in from this utility token that they're earning on these storage nodes, will have the opportunity to it. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we'll put it over there and get it onto DEXs. I don't know if it'll go up, stay the same, go down. I don't know, but
Mhm.
at least it'll have the opportunity to compete fairly with some of our competitors who, have bought big Binance listings and so forth. And we just haven't been able to compete in those worlds. So hopefully within about 2 months, be able to stand head and shoulders with our competitors.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I thank you so much, Ken, for coming on today and kind of giving us the lowdown on this and explaining everything. We're going to keep a real close eye on the comment section of the video, and make sure that any questions that come up, maybe even you and your team might browse through those and maybe even make some feedback comments as well. But again, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay.
Sure. Really appreciate it, man.
All right. Bye now.